Thank you, Vasudha, and thank you very much, India Bioscience and other um, YIM 2021 organizers. I am audible, right? Vasudha, if you could confirm.
Yes, Sarah, we can
Yes,
hear.
yeah. All right,
Yes.
thank you.
Also slides visible.
Okay, wonderful. So I was just thanking you all for inviting me to speak on the topic of public engagement with science, connecting with communities. And this is something that I have been involved in for some time at the science funding charity, DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance. And while this is a very vast area of research and practice, and 20 minutes is not going to really do any justice to the intricacies and nuances of science communication or connecting with communities through communication and engagement, I'll try to provide very quick overview based on my experience and what I've learned over the years. Um, the fields of science communication, public engagement, research have evolved quite rapidly, at least since the time I've started. And at least to some extent in India, we've come to appreciate why making science more accessible to non-scientists as well as involving them in research. The process of research and policy is important. And science communication and public engagement with science have also grown tremendously as fields of practice and research. Again, perhaps not so much in India, but in many other science-faring nations. And the purpose of this talk is not really to overwhelm you with the various theories and models that we have in science engagement, or to even coax you to take up science communication or public engagement, but really to leave you with some practical tips and some food for thought on how you could integrate science engagement in your research program. And especially now, I think is a good time as you start out as an independent researcher. This is the time when you are visualizing and planning how you may want to craft your career in academia, and if science engagement would be one of those elements you would like to integrate in your research program. Also, I have to also I would like to say that in my view, science communication to have a real world for it to have a real world impact, it would have to be embedded in research in the scientific enterprise. Doing it on and off may give us personal satisfaction, but it may not really have any real world impact as it would need to be done in a sustained and effective manner. And I'm sure I don't have to say this to this audience, but we would all agree that science and technology have completely taken over our lives. They're present in all possible facets of our life. In fact, it's the very fuel that is driving our progress and evolution as a species. But to ensure that science and technology have the desired impact on society, a positive impact on society, we'll have to ensure that people are at the very core of what we do in scientific enterprise. And I know that it sounds very obvious, but unfortunately, this is something that we don't give enough importance to, is really making science more people-centric. And I think if I'm just giving you I've just put up a few examples of some very, very significant initiatives and programs, such as the pandemic that we're going through. If you look at the COVID-19 response, or for that matter, response to any other health crisis, or if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which are 17 interlinked global goals which have been designed as a blueprint to achieve better and more sustainable future for all, or the recent science and technology innovation deliberations, what would underpin the success of all these efforts would be public's participation. And for that, we need to be able to communicate and engage with various public groups in an effective and timely manner, also in a very sustained manner. And I think if we even look at other flourishing science ecosystems, we would notice that they depend on the creative capabilities of researchers, of policymakers, of private entities, of the public at large. And I think one way to make such a system stronger is by strengthening its various parts individually, or by strengthening the links between these parts. And this is where communication plays a very important role in strengthening these links between between these different parts, fostering collaboration, and which is really important, I guess, for sustainable growth and development. And I think communication is would be again a very obvious thing to say here, is central to human experience. It's a skill that we use to develop and nurture relationships. It helps us to convey our ideas and thoughts, something that you're all doing at YIM at the moment. It also helps us to share a common experience or an understanding, so that we're able to collaborate, we are able to come together when a challenge, when we encounter any challenge. And I guess perhaps the most fundamental purpose of communication is to develop meaningful, purposeful relationships. And I really like this quote by George Bernard Shaw, where he says that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And I think that's because we are not mindful of our audience, but focus more on what and how we want to communicate, and not necessarily on how a communication message would be perceived by our audiences, or what they would like to learn, or what they would like to discuss. And I'm no communication expert really, but what I've learned from my experience is that the only way to stimulate meaning in minds of people we engage with is to help them make sense of what we're trying to convey to them. And for that we need to understand them well, their needs, their aspirations, their values and beliefs, and only then will we be able to successfully convey our thoughts and ideas. And I'm sure Shane in the next session will talk more about what are what essential elements of effective communication. And so that's why I want to leave you with this thought, that communication is not about you, it's really about them. If your audience is not able to grasp or understand what you're trying to convey to them, you've not been successful in communicating to them. And for that, we have to respect our audience's values, where they come from, their existing prior knowledge, and their existing beliefs. Another thing, of course, it's again a very obvious thing that I've put up here, that no matter which career you are in, you plan to pursue, it's or even otherwise in life, communication is a very, very fundamental part of our daily lives. And a very important point that I want to mention here is that this idea that more communication is actually better is a myth. I think we have to communicate effectively, we have to communicate purposefully and empathetically. And with the advent of technology and the digital devices, we are communicating quite quickly, quite swiftly, but we don't really put enough effort into really making sure that our communication is reaching to the people in the way we want it to reach. So I think just by communicating more, we will not achieve our objective. And of course, there are various recipes to communicate, to engage with people. Of course, having a very clear, consistent message with the appropriate level of information is necessary. Openness, honesty, and an authentic tone in your communication is necessary. The sense of a connection, a passion is necessary to reach out to people. After all, we are communicating between human beings, and we are emotional beings. We operate on emotions, and I think that's key when we are communicating. And of course, having goals and purpose and direction in communication is absolutely necessary. And last but not the least, clarity and transparency, and also measurement and accountability in communication is extremely important in making sure that you are communicating to engage and not just communicating for the sake of it. When we talk about science communication, it's really coming together of two worlds of of science and of communication. And of course, I don't know how interactive we can be at this point, but some of the words that I wanted to ask the audience, what comes to your mind when I say science? I mean, what kind of words, what kind of adjectives come to your mind, when I say science? And more often than not, it would be, of course, research, evidence. It generates evidence. It involves experts. It involves institutions, and it is based on facts. But when we talk about communication, it's a lot about values, how we connect with each other. It's about how we interpret messages. It's about filters that we sometimes apply in communication. It's about emotions and feelings. And so science communication is really like a marriage between facts and feelings. And I think it's a very, very difficult marriage, really, to bring facts and feelings together. And it's a brilliant slide that Marina Joubert, one of the really fantastic science communication researcher, has put together. And it's also important for me here to mention that what science communication is not. Science communication is not a one-way process. It's almost as much about giving and receiving as much about giving as it's about receiving. It's also about active listening. And so it's important that we're not only communicating, we're not only talking, but we're also listening to our audiences, what they thought about what we are saying. It's also not a tick box exercise. Like I mentioned earlier, it should really be an integral part of doing research. And last but not the least, it's definitely not about self-promotion, but rather about informing, engaging, and collaborating with the public. So science communication and public engagement, which I'm sure you've heard a lot. We're talking a lot about these concepts in India, in Indian science. And it's really about communicating scientific information in a way that non-scientists, non-experts can understand and appreciate, while also ensuring that they are equipped with the facts and can ask the right questions and are able to make informed decisions about matters related to science or matters related to their health and well-being. And like I mentioned earlier, that the reason you're communicating is really your audience, and so for that you have to really be mindful of where they're coming from. The first speaker also spoke about context. I think we have to really understand the context in which we are communicating, and so the cultural context or the socioeconomic context of your audience, the religious beliefs. Of course, we cannot ignore the fact that religion is a huge part of our sensibilities in India and of people. And so we have to be mindful of that. We have to also be mindful of the prior scientific information that your audience or people you're engaging with carry with them. And of course, a really critical aspect is language, that even though the language of science is English, we more often than not, we are engaging with communities that don't have access to science, and therefore we have to talk to them and engage with them in their language or in the language they understand. So these are all these different factors that play into engaging with scientists, with non-scientists, with public. And of course, this is something that I'm sure most of you would be aware of. And for those of you who are new to this space or new to the idea of science communication, I've just put down a list of why communicating science, why engaging with the public is important. And I have, and for those who are already familiar with the reasons and have already made sense of why science communication is important or not important, this may seem like a bit of a refresher. And so I will not go through each of these points individually, but I think an important reason why we communicate science, of course, is to increase awareness of not just the scientific information, but also the value that science brings to society. And also, I think because science is funded by government funds, and especially in India, where majority of scientific research is funded by the taxpayers, funded by the government. It's important that the public understands, what their money, what their fund is, what their money is being used for, and they also have the right to shape the research agenda and have a say on how these discoveries that we are how these discoveries are being used. And I really liked this little illustration here about, what do researchers also get. It's really a give and take relationship here, where, while you talk to non-science groups, it could be school students, teachers, other community groups, not only do you share the information that you have, the scientific knowledge you have, you also get insights into, what are better ways of communicating my research to them, or what are better ways of doing my research, and what are some concerns that people may have about science, about scientific research in the country. So it's really a dialogue. It's really a two-way process. And I think that's how we should approach science engagement, which is as a two-way process. And again, talking about listening to people, some of the things that I have heard during my time in this field is from, of course, non-science groups, is that we have a great idea for popularizing science, but I don't know how to approach scientists for advice. I have a question for scientists, but I don't know how to approach them. So of course, this points to the fact that public access to experts and scientists is missing, and it's very important to collaborate with non-scientists to make science more accessible, because they might be able to interpret science in a way that people who are non-science people might be able to understand better. And so this collaboration is also very important. And they also, what I've also heard a lot is they don't listen to what we have to say. Yeah.
If I may quickly interrupt, maybe two
Yeah.
more minutes. We have some interesting questions to discuss after that.
Okay, sure. We'll do that. So I think I'll have to rush through this.
No, I mean 2 minutes, and I think most of the questions are going to be asked in the same.
Sure.
Please go ahead.
Sure. That's fine. So yes, so I'll and in the last point here, I mentioned that there's really no fixed formula here for science communication. There's no magic bullet either. There are just good practices. There are some tried and tested methods that seem to work. So there's no right or wrong way of doing it. It's just the way that works better for your audience. And so there are various models of science communication. I'll run through them very quickly, just so that you're able to make sense of how to approach science communication in case you are planning to in the times to come. So of course, the most basic model is the deficit model, which works on the idea that your target audience has gaps in their knowledge of science, and that through outreach you can teach people and fill these gaps. There's also the dialogue model, or the participation engagement model that I've been talking about. And so here are some of the examples. I've just listed them out here. Here's some examples of a contextual or a dialogue model that would include science fair exhibitions where there's interaction with the public, there are panel discussions, engagement with media, engagement with policymakers, engagement with patient groups, and all of this would really come under the contextual dialogue model. Then, of course, you have the participation or engagement model where you're actively collaborating with the public towards a common goal. And the various formats could include citizen science, participatory action research, where you're collaborating with communities to actually frame research questions and also to frame your study design. And so there are various definitions for public engagement with science for different people, and it could start from humanizing science and innovation to simply building relationships. And at least that's how I view science engagement, is really a way to build relationships. And I just have a few other pointers on if you are planning to develop a science engagement project, then these are some of the things that you may want to think about quite deeply, which is, of course, the purpose of why you want to, what the purpose of your science engagement project, the audience that you would like to reach out to, that you would like to work with. The tools and methodologies, again, would depend on your audience and the purpose, and what kind of partners and collaborations can you bring to the table to make this project happen. And of course, a very important aspect of this would be evaluation, and that's because it will help you, it will give you evidence to say whether your methodology, whether what you had set out to do worked or not. So this is just a few pointers here about what how you could come up with how you could define your purpose, how you could define your audiences, because you would have to adapt your tools and methods depending on your audience. And in case, of course, as a researcher, you would not have all the tools and all the skills to implement the project. So you may want to also consider bringing in other partners who are not necessarily from science, but who might be able to help you deliver that project. And of course, with evaluation, should not be an afterthought. It should really be part of of the design of the project from the very beginning. And so this is something that I would highly recommend that you keep, make sure that it's part of your thinking. And this is, again, a very important, slide that I've taken from MESH, a very wonderful community engagement network, where you have to really define whether you're going for a wider engagement, a greater outreach, or you are really aiming for a deeper and a more modest outreach, because your tools, your approach, all of that would really vary. And so this is, again, something that you would have to keep in mind when you set out to design and implement a science engagement project. And there are various examples. I mean, the internet is flooded with fantastic examples of science engagement projects. So you can look up this project called Heart and Lung Shop, really, really creative project around cardiovascular and respiratory research. There's also Superheroes Against Superbugs project that I was part of, was anchored by India Alliance, that aimed to raise awareness on antibiotic resistance. The Dust Bunny project is another very interesting project based in Ghana. I would again suggest that you look this up. And a project that India Bioscience funded recently through its outreach grant is the citizen science project called the Young Naturalists of Andhra, where researchers are training and partnering with young students to collect biodiversity-related data, which will later be verified and used by the scientific community for research and analysis. And yeah, so there are many, many, many fantastic projects on the internet that you can look up for inspiration. There's some of the things that we do at India Alliance to empower, to communicate science, to facilitate science communication, and also advocate the need for communicating and science. And these are some of the things that we have at India Alliance. And I'm just going to leave these list of resources for you that you could look up, and I'll share the slides with India Bioscience so they can share it with you. And finally, for funding, of course, there's not enough funding out there to do science engagement in India, but you could look up India Alliance's Public Engagement Fund. Of course, India Bioscience, I'm sure has, as you may already know, provides grants for outreach. And there are also various international research grants that provide separate funding for science outreach and engagement. So you could perhaps apply for those. And there are other funding sources you can find on this website. I will probably skip this because we don't have enough time, and maybe we can cover some of these things in the Q&A session. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sara. Sorry to have interrupted. So, public engagement is key for science research. Mm-hmm. This has been spotlighted by your talk. Thank you for giving several examples. We can gain some insights from them. We'll also hear about this from Shane in a few minutes on communication beyond publication. So maybe we can take some interesting questions. There are a lot of them. I think Prabhat Tiwari, would you like to unmute and ask question?
So, am I audible?
Yeah, Prabhat, go ahead.
Yeah. So, actually, in many cases, the scientists, they are not that good with communicating with non-science people. As in, so are there programs which can enable them to discuss more with the non-science people, as in more in the layman language rather than being very much scientific?
Yes, I think that's a really good point and a very valid concern that unfortunately in India, we don't have very many courses available. But of course, India Alliance runs some science communication workshops where we provide, I wouldn't say it's in-depth training, but we do provide pointers and practical tips on how you could communicate with public non-science groups. And but of course, internationally, there are many programs and various workshops that you can find on some of these websites, where where you can actually find some free courses that you could enroll in, and yeah. But I think it's important to appreciate and recognize that scientists are not trained in communication, and I think that one has to work on improving our communication skills during our training as a scientist. So yeah, so I'm sorry that I've not been able to give you a very clear answer to this, but internet has a whole lot of very good courses online that you could enroll in, and these are some of the websites that you could visit to find these courses.
Thank you, Sarah. Can we call? I think Bhakti would like to ask a question. Bhakti.
Hi, Sarah. So,
Hi, Bhakti.
Am I audible?
Yes.
So if we have research going on which engages humans actively, but we would like to reach to a larger audience and involve the public, as you mentioned in some of the programs.
Mm-hmm.
Does India Alliance or similar, funds support more public engagement plans, like funding the research for engagement?
Yes, so through the Public Engagement Fund, which at the moment is on a pause, we are trying to refine and improve this funding program. But you could apply, I think whenever we launch it again, you could apply to this fund, which doesn't provide funding only for research, but for public engagement practice, and research and evaluation could be part of that. But you could reach out to us if you have if you have an idea in mind.
Sure.
About if you have a science engagement idea, or if you have an idea of a research in science engagement, you could just reach out to us.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks.
Sarah, there's a question from Smita from IBS. What should be done at the policy level to bring a change regarding science outreach, by the scientific community? I think this is a very relevant question because policy should come up eventually. So what do you think about that?
Yes, no, absolutely. I think policies really shape the macro structures and shape the scientific enterprise, and so I think if we want to embed science communication, practice of science communication and public engagement in research, I think it would have to be through formal policies and structures, and I think the STIP deliberations and the STIP draft does lay a lot of emphasis on science communication and public engagement. But I guess we'll have to see how this is implemented, how these policy recommendations are implemented at the national and at funding agencies, at institutions, and other bodies. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. So we have one last question. We'll take it live from Priyankar. Priyankar De, are you there?
Yes, hello. So I have a question for Sarah, is that, are there any community outreach possibilities available for young faculties and who are basically enthusiastic in science communicating to the, common people in the society? But at the same time, they do not want to, spend 100% of their time doing this. My question is because, at least in India, differentiating for the common people, differentiating between actual science and pseudoscience is very important. How we should, as a faculty, we should communicate to the community, and is there any other actual outreach possibilities that faculty can be engaged?
Yes, so I think this is something that we're all have been collectively thinking about, is how do we have more formal structures in place that would enable researchers to engage more with these communities. And while there are organizations like India Alliance, India Bioscience that provides funding and some kind of training support to researchers, I think we would probably need a lot more such support for researchers. And I think a lot of institutions do provide outreach support. So they'll have to come forward. I think institutions will have to come forward and provide support to faculty to do more outreach, and to be able to do more outreach, and support you in whatever way they can, to be able to connect to these communities and to take science to them. So unfortunately, we don't have too many in India, but of course, if there's anyone in the audience, or as part of the organizers who would like to weigh in on here on whether they are aware of other organizations or other structures that could better support researchers outreach, I would welcome you to.
Sarah, this is Rashna.
Yeah, hi Rashna.
Hi. I don't know if our young investigators are aware of the SERB policy, that's the Science and Engineering Research Board policy. Now, I don't know what you think of it, but every SERB grant carries with it a requirement for what is called Scientific Social Responsibility, SSR. And you cannot get a research grant without signing up on conducting an SSR activity. These include writing articles, getting students for like an open day, having a trainee for 2 months. So, it's on the SERB website, so go take a look. And this is kind of, everyone who has a SERB grant has to do this, whether they like it or not. So again, I don't know what you think of that, but certainly there is that kind of funding available. And that is about 20,000 rupees per grant is given for this purpose. Every SERB grant carries that money for this purpose.
Thank you, Rashna. I guess we do need to put such information together in one place, for all these provisions that might be available and might be provided by other granting agencies.